Happy birthday to my father. He would have been 67 today. Unfortunately, on February 5th, he passed. It's been hard on our family. Um, we miss him. My father was a very stand-up individual. He, um, very honest, taught me to be the best person that I can. Anything that you see, any good concerning me, goes back to him and my mom too. But as far as like as an example, I had a direct example as a man, which is my father. Um, he gave up a lot for my family. You know, he was a musician as well. He's the reason that I got into music, um, and also the reason that I play the main instrument that I'm known for. Some of you guys probably never heard the stuff that I've done music wise, but um, my dad actually recommended me to play the bass because they didn't have any guitars um, in the orchestra class. And the thing is, actually, February 5th is my 31st anniversary in playing that bass. I've been playing since 1988, but thanks to my dad, you know, who knows what would have happened if I didn't play it. I've been on tours. You know, it's opened up a lot of doors, even with stuff that I do in my community when it comes to music. My dad's to I don't want to say blame, but to get the credit for that just by recommending, and also by with some of the programs that I have being a direct inspiration for that as well. You know, the program that I host with a lot of youth, um, I was directly influenced just as a kid, um, just as a kid, like watching my dad and his friends play in the park, and how my dad would, when we have our family outings, it was funny. My dad like would just go. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I don't know if he knew some of the cats or not, but he would go randomly park at the park and jam with cats. But he was used to doing that with his friends, and that was an inspiration as a kid wanting to just do that. And he taught me my first guitar chord. Um, I was in his band. My mom and dad had a group that was called Foolish Things. Um, People might label them gospel, but they weren't. It's kind of hard for me to describe what that band sounded like. If you like stuff like Sade meets jazz fusion, meets like Joan Armatrading, like folk stuff, meets like funk, rock and roll, everything. It was all that. They had pretty much um, Christ-centered lyrics because they were concerned about the people around us, like, and just the world in general. Like I didn't grow up in a home where it was like, oh, like just fire and brimstone type stuff. It was more creative. My siblings are all creative too, but always my mom and dad, like, you know taught us, and just how all that stuff came from the Most High. And they, by example, even more so. My dad back in the 70s was in a group called the Fistful of Soul. um and I think they were a vocal group, but they had a backing band, which, for all you true funksters out there, became the band Kiddo. They were actually the backing band for my dad's soul group called Fistful of Soul back in the 70s. And if you guys don't know who Kiddo is, look them up. They were from Long Beach back in the very early 80s. My dad also knew people like Gloria Jones, who was married to Mark Bolan from T-Rex. She also had a hit called Tainted Love, which everybody knows by Soft Cell, the new wave group Soft Cell. But Gloria did the song first. Um, he did also a session for Marvin Gaye. Um, Name was not credited, unfortunately, him and a few guys that he knew. And he was paid in Jack in the Box. And it's not to throw shade at Marvin Gaye. I've had people do that with me, being a musician even now. That struggle is real as a musician. I'm serious, Um, there's a lot of connections, and my dad knew people, from bands like War and, you know, um, just a lot of cats, man. Like a lot of cats. Like his friends vouched for that because back in the 70s, all that stuff, like you had people that were around LA, like one of my dad's friends used to room with David Bowie at one point. Like these guys were there, they were around at that time. It was not, yeah, they were kind of known, but like, I mean, they were known, but like they were just, LA kind of was kind of the epicenter of that. And it was almost like if you're a musician during that time in certain circles, it wasn't like, like all starstruck. They were just kind of regular people and kind of trying to see what the pulse of LA was like, especially if they were from a place like England, like Eric Burton came out here, and kicked it with guys from War. Those guys were from Long Beach and Compton and all that. But getting back into what my father, having a young, being young and having a family, because him and my mom were very young, very early 20s, actually late teens when they had uh, my sister, my older sister, and they had me in their very early 20s. My dad was just like, hey, I got to raise my family, and just kind of got out of the whole music scene thing. But it's not like he left music, because that, music was around me when I was a kid. I mean, if it wasn't albums, you know, it was instruments. My dad like um had guitars and Casios around us, like, and just there's music always around, and we remember a lot of our moments by music. He would take us on outings and we'd be listening to everything from the Stylistics to Sade to Jethro Tull, and everything in between. My dad was the first person to tell me about groups like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And I think my earliest remembrance of Led Zeppelin was him on the freeway playing one of their songs. He knew, he kind of was amazed that I was getting into like a lot of 60s and 70s music, because in the 80s it was like mostly new wave and hip hop that was popular. And so he was just like, huh, how are you finding out about all this? And then he just started telling me about groups. Plus, me seeing his album collection was very eclectic. Him and my mom listened to a lot of different stuff. And, they had their own musical group, which I actually was their first bass player. And one of the things I remember my dad telling me was I totally, I totally had a bass that he got me that was fretted, and then you could take the neck off and make it into a fretless neck. He thought, I thought, both of us thought that I would have the songs even if I switched the neck, because, I was used to playing upright bass. And I totally fouled on the live show. Like it was a snowball. It was it was bad. And my mom, she didn't want me to be embarrassed, so she didn't want me to, go out there the next year. My dad was like, nah, he'll do better. And sure enough, the next year I did. My mom wasn't ashamed of me, but she just was like, you know nurturing to the fact of how I felt, more like kind of, she didn't want me to feel, you know ashamed, but I have loving parents, man. My dad, like, and I also, we always talked. I can say that I was close to my dad, even in times where we bumped heads. I still had a relationship with my father. He was in the home. I had a two-parent family. A lot of people are always talking about black kids in single parent houses. Not all of us grew up like that. And I have not only had two parents in the home, but they were nurturing. Like, I mean, they did the best that they could with what they knew, and they learned along the way. Trust me. This is my dad back in the 70s right here. Me and my dad. on one of our outings, chilling, family. I think that was for my birthday. Me and my dad eventually, I wish that he would have at least made a demo of him and my mom's group. They had a lot of great songs, a lot of really cool, innovative stuff that sounds like what people call neo soul now. They were doing that stuff in the early 80s. I'm serious. It's hard for me to even describe what that group was. I wish that we had recorded. I told my dad if he ever wanted to record some songs, but he never really got to it. Um, but some of my bands, my dad actually played in too. I was in a band called Create. It was basically it was all improv, but we also had just things that we did in the community as well. My dad played in that band. He also played in my punk band, which is what you're looking at right now, Millions of Shaved Heads. And I asked him, I'm like, are you serious? He's all, hey, I want to try something different, you know. And yeah, we played that. I think this is the last Millions of Shaved Heads gig that we did 2 years ago, at some dive bar in Long Beach where I live. This is, we're on an outing for my nephew's. I think it was my nephew's birthday. I'm not sure. Yeah, it was. I'm playing paintball. And my dad, he's like in the back with the red shirt on. I'm looking like like some kind of. Yeah, I'm not, it was funny what my dad was saying what I looked like. Just said I looked like an ISIS member. Um, Sorry, that was me and my dad just chilling, um, being silly, you know. Yeah, my dad and I also had a food vlogging thing called Food G's. If you look, I didn't really post a lot of it on YouTube. I think there's only one video on YouTube. But, my dad introduced me to a lot of different things culturally. Like he always took us around LA, took us to different places to eat. My mom and dad is the first people that introduced me to Indian food and like, Middle Eastern food and stuff like that. My dad and I were the only ones we were the only ones that would just be willing to try different stuff. So we would just go out to different food places and film that and film the business so we could promote them. And we were called the Food G's. And my dad made that up because our last name, the beginning of our last name is a G. And plus, he just thought it would be funny to call it that. This is a performance art piece that I was in. My dad played in. He played in a few of my performance art pieces. This is him just chilling with his synthesizer. This is the first Food G's um, restaurant that we went to. I think, was it? I think it may have been. I'm not sure. Um, I thought this was the Belizean place, but it might be another place that is closer to us. But this is like one of the first Food G's that we did. Um, my dad at the show. My dad played in some group. I forget what they were called, but they totally were on a whole nother thing. My dad's on the left at my baptism um, into the Orthodox Church. Him and my mom, they're kind of worried about me because it's a little bit more traditional than what, we grew up with as far as like our faith is concerned. And they didn't want me to get caught up in just the traditional aspect of it. My mom and dad were all about the spiritual part of what we believe. And to be honest, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be in the Orthodox Church because of just those things that I learned from them. That was a step to my journey into the Orthodox Church. And I still look at it as a part of what I learned in life. And being in the Orthodox Church confirmed what I learned from my mom and dad. So it was great having them there. It was an early baptism too. My dad and I at the Long Beach Fish Market. You know, That's my dad, man. This is like the old church that we went to, and I think they used to store all the studio items like for the praise team at a store. Um, so we would have to take that back, and my dad would haul that stuff, you know. But it's a trip, man. I'm missing my father, man. My father taught me a whole lot of things, man. When it came to um, ethics, when it came to, of course, music, when it came to food, when it came to people in general. Not to look at everybody as the same, but to look at them as individual people. And I grew up that way. I grew up around, you know, he was the first person to take me through the Bible and show me, black genealogies in the Bible. Like that was really important. He had that understanding of our faith, which is why I can't agree that Christianity is a white man's religion because I didn't grow up that way. I didn't grow up learning it that way. Um, he taught me a lot about everything, man. A lot. He sacrificed a lot for us, even to the point where I'm sorry, he cared so much for us. Like, I think that was one of the things that really kept him, even though he went through so much health wise, you know. I'm sorry. He definitely is going to be missed. Every day I'm going to miss my father, no matter what. I'm sorry. Memory eternal to my dad, you know. He, he ran the race well. And when, even with things that, I'm not saying everybody's perfect, but even through that, he would acknowledge that as well and would learn from such. And I could only wish to be even half the man that he was. I don't have my own kids, but I had the greatest example for a father that anyone could have, you know. Memory eternal. I just thought I would share that with you guys. Peace and blessings to all of y'all. And, you know, get with your parents if you have either one of them or both, and just spend as much time as you can with them, because you never know. You never know. Have a nice day.